What if I told you that before the Great Wall rose as the colossal fortress we recognize today, China was a battleground where entire kingdoms could crumble in the blink of an eye? Imagine this. It's 700 BC, and from the crest of a lonely hilltop, you watch plumes of smoke spiral into the sky as rival warlords unleash chaos, torching villages and shattering lives in their ruthless quest for dominance. This isn't the stable, unified China you've seen in history books. This is a fractured land where survival was a daily gamble, and the dream of unity seemed as distant and unreachable as the stars. Today we're diving deep into the forgotten world that existed before China's greatest architectural marvel ever touched the earth. We're talking about a time when the land we now call China was actually dozens of independent kingdoms, each fighting tooth and nail for dominance. This is the story of the Warring States period, the Spring and Autumn era, and the incredible civilizations that laid the groundwork for everything that came after. But here's what's absolutely mind-blowing. The people living in this chaotic time had no idea they were setting the stage for one of history's most ambitious construction projects. They were too busy trying to survive in a world where political alliances shifted like sand and military innovation meant the difference between prosperity and extinction. Let me paint you a picture of what daily life looked like in ancient China around 800 BC. Imagine waking up in a small farming village along the Yellow River. The morning mist clings to rice paddies that stretch as far as the eye can see, but this peaceful scene is deceptive. Your village belongs to the state of Qi today, but who knows which banner will fly overhead next month? Maybe Wei, maybe Chu, maybe some warlord you've never even heard of. The political landscape was absolutely wild. We're talking about over 100 different states at the beginning of this period, each with their own rulers, armies, customs, and ambitions. Think of it like medieval Europe, but cranked up to 11. The Zhou Dynasty technically ruled over everything, but their power was more symbolic than real. Local lords had become so powerful that they barely acknowledged the Zhou Emperor's authority. This wasn't just political chaos. It was cultural dynamism on an unprecedented scale. Each state developed its own unique characteristics. The people of Chu in the south were known for their mystical traditions and elaborate bronze work. They created some of the most stunning artifacts we've ever discovered, with intricate designs that seem almost otherworldly. Meanwhile, the northern states like Jin were becoming military powerhouses, developing new weapons and tactics that would reshape warfare forever. But here's where things get really interesting. This constant conflict wasn't just destructive, it was incredibly innovative. When your survival depends on being better than your neighbors, you push the boundaries of what's possible. The period before the Great Wall saw explosive advances in metallurgy, agriculture, philosophy, and military engineering that would define Chinese civilization for millennia. Let's talk about the weapons revolution that was happening. Bronze was giving way to iron, and this wasn't just a minor upgrade. It was a complete game changer. Iron weapons were sharper, stronger, and much cheaper to produce than bronze. Suddenly, states could arm larger armies with superior equipment. The crossbow was invented during this time, giving infantry the power to take down heavily armored cavalry from a distance. Can you imagine the psychological impact? One peasant with a crossbow could kill a noble warrior who had trained his entire life. The military innovations didn't stop there. States began building sophisticated fortification systems. Not the Great Wall yet, but smaller defensive walls protecting individual territories. These walls taught engineers valuable lessons about construction techniques, logistics, and defensive strategy. Every failed siege, every successful assault, every clever defensive innovation was building the knowledge base that would eventually make the Great Wall possible. Agriculture was undergoing its own revolution. The invention of iron plows meant farmers could work harder soil more efficiently. New irrigation techniques were turning previously unusable land into productive farmland. Population was booming, cities were growing, and with more people came more complex social structures and greater potential for both cooperation and conflict. Speaking of cities, The urban centers of pre-wall China were absolutely magnificent. Take Linsi, the capital of Qi State. Archaeological evidence suggests it housed over 300,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in the world at that time. The streets buzzed with merchants selling silk, bronze mirrors, lacquered wood, and exotic spices. Craftsmen worked in specialized districts, creating everything from delicate jade ornaments to massive ritual vessels weighing hundreds of pounds. These cities weren't just commercial centers, they were intellectual hotbeds. This period saw the birth of Chinese philosophy as we know it. Confucius was walking these same streets, developing ideas about social harmony and moral governance. Laozi was formulating Taoist principles about balance and natural order. The legalist school was arguing for strict laws and harsh punishments to maintain social order. These weren't just academic debates, they were practical discussions about how to organize society in a world of constant uncertainty. The economic systems were fascinating too. States were moving beyond simple barter toward more sophisticated monetary systems. Cowrie shells, bronze coins, and even gold were being used as currency. Trade routes were expanding, connecting distant regions and spreading new ideas along with goods. The famous Silk Road was still centuries away, but its foundations were being laid by merchants brave enough to travel between hostile states. But let's not romanticize this period. Life was brutal for most people. Warfare wasn't the clean, honorable combat of legends. It was savage and total. Entire populations could be enslaved or massacred when their state fell. Archaeological sites from this period show clear evidence of violent destruction. Burned buildings, mass graves, and hastily buried treasure hoards tell the story of communities that disappeared overnight. The social structure was rigid and hierarchical. At the top were the aristocratic families who controlled land and armies. Below them were merchants and craftsmen who served the elite. At the bottom were farmers and laborers who made up the vast majority of the population, but had little say in their fate. Women had even fewer rights and opportunities, though some exceptional individuals managed to wield significant influence behind the scenes. Environmental factors played a huge role in shaping this pre-wall world. The Yellow River was both a blessing and a curse. Its fertile silt created rich farmland, but its tendency to flood or change course could devastate entire regions. States rose and fell partly based on their ability to manage water resources. The state that could control flooding and irrigation had a massive advantage over its neighbors. Climate was another crucial factor. This period experienced significant climate variations that affected agricultural production and population movements. Droughts could trigger massive migrations as people searched for better farmland. Cold snaps could disrupt growing seasons and lead to famine. These environmental pressures added another layer of instability to an already chaotic political situation. The technological innovations of this era were staggering. Beyond weapons and agriculture, we saw advances in astronomy, mathematics, and engineering. Chinese astronomers were making detailed observations of celestial events and developing sophisticated calendar systems. Engineers were building complex water management systems that could redirect entire rivers. Mathematicians were developing new computational methods that would influence Chinese science for centuries. Art and culture flourished despite the chaos, or perhaps because of it. Competition between states extended to cultural achievements. Rulers commissioned elaborate palaces, temples, and tombs to demonstrate their power and sophistication. The famous terracotta army was still hundreds of years in the future, but the artistic traditions and technical skills that would make it possible were being developed during this period. Religious and spiritual practices were incredibly diverse. Each region had its own local deities and customs, but there was also a growing sense of shared Chinese identity. Ancestor worship became more standardized and elaborate. Divination practices, using oracle bones and other methods, became more sophisticated. These spiritual traditions provided some stability in an otherwise uncertain world. The role of women in this pre-wall society was complex and varied by region and social class. While generally subordinate to men, some women achieved remarkable influence. Archaeological evidence suggests that some women served as priestesses or shamanesses, with significant religious authority. Others influence politics through their relationships with powerful men. A few exceptional cases show women who may have ruled territories in their own right. Education and literacy were expanding, but they remained privileges of the wealthy. The development of standardized writing systems was crucial for administration and communication between states. Scholars traveled between courts, sharing knowledge and ideas. This intellectual exchange was creating a more unified Chinese culture, even as political fragmentation continued. Trade networks were becoming increasingly sophisticated. Merchants developed complex systems for managing risk and credit across hostile territories. Specialized goods from different regions created interdependencies that sometimes transcended political boundaries. Silk production was becoming a major industry, though it would be centuries before the famous Silk Road made it globally significant. The military culture of this period was fascinating and brutal. Warrior aristocrats followed complex codes of honor, but these codes often broke down in the face of practical necessities. New military technologies and tactics were constantly being developed and tested in real combat. The concept of total war, mobilizing entire populations for military purposes, was becoming more common. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new aspects of this pre-war world. Recent excavations have uncovered massive palace complexes, sophisticated workshops, and elaborate burial sites that show just how wealthy and advanced some of these ancient states became. Each new discovery adds pieces to the puzzle of how Chinese civilization developed during this crucial period. As we near the end of this journey through pre-war China, it's important to understand that this period of chaos and innovation was absolutely essential for what came next. The unification under the Qin Dynasty and the construction of the Great Wall weren't just political and military achievements. They were the culmination of centuries of cultural, technological, and social development. The constant warfare taught military engineers everything they needed to know about fortification and defense. The economic competition between states created the wealth necessary to fund massive construction projects. The philosophical developments provided the ideological framework for unified rule. The technological innovations made large-scale construction possible. Even the environmental challenges taught valuable lessons about logistics and resource management. When Qin Shi Huang finally unified China and ordered the construction of the Great Wall, he wasn't creating something entirely new. He was combining and expanding upon defensive systems that had been developing for centuries. The knowledge, skills, and resources that made the Great Wall possible were all products of this chaotic but incredibly creative period. The people living through the Warring States period couldn't have imagined that their struggles were preparing the ground for one of humanity's greatest architectural achievements. They were focused on immediate survival and local concerns, but their innovations in warfare, governance, technology, and culture created the foundation upon which the Great Wall and unified China would eventually stand. This pre-wall period reminds us that great historical achievements rarely emerge from nowhere. They're usually the result of long periods of experimentation, competition, and gradual development. The chaos and conflict that characterized ancient China before the Great Wall wasn't just destructive. It was creative, innovative, and ultimately essential for everything that followed. The next time you see images of the Great Wall stretching across mountain ridges, remember the forgotten kingdoms and vanished peoples who made it possible. Their stories of struggle, innovation, and survival are just as remarkable as the wall itself. And understanding their world helps us appreciate not just what the Great Wall represents, but how it came to be.